Hey everybody, welcome back to Copilot, a YouTube channel to help organizations orient around what matters most, their customers and their people. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you the 5 trends that you need to be aware of in your digital transformations. And I'm going to kind of walk you through the specific ones, kind of talk through how they will impact you, and hopefully give you the tools that you need as you kind of take on 2023. My name is Pablo Alejo, and I'm your Copilot. So I'm going to jump right into this and start by saying I am really excited about this video. When it comes to looking ahead, trends are that barometer of, imagining what's possible. And I absolutely love to imagine what's possible. Technologies are evolving at such a pace right now that, every year it seems like we're making a monumental shift and a monumental leap forward. And that type of evolution is fascinating to see. But the thing is that while technology moves fast, we as humans do not. And that is why digital transformations are such a crucial aspect of organizational change. And it's trying to find and create organizations that are resilient enough to handle the change and the constant nature of the change that's happening and being able to kind of pull that together. But with the evolution of technology, such as artificial intelligence, AR, VR, blockchain, cybersecurity, like the way things are kind of moving, it's very hard to keep up. And so this time of year, rounding out the December, coming into the holidays, coming into the new year, I get really excited because I want to see how people start to think about what's possible. And then I start to apply my own experience in figuring out, well, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my clients? Every year, organizations create their trends, and they will publish those out for everyone to kind of consume. And I promise you, I have read no less than 20 different trends from the world's leading organizations. And I use that information and I apply it to the work that I do. I look at my own experience and what I am seeing, and I try to figure out what actually makes sense for me and kind of separate the signal from the noise. The top 5 things that you constantly hear about are going to be artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, cloud computing, cybersecurity, and blockchain. Those generally dominate every trend report that you see. But few reports really talk about how those capabilities are impacting our culture, our organizations, and our customers. And so I want to take a different kind of look at these trends and kind of focus through the lens of how will these trends impact you. So with that, I'm going to jump right into it and kind of talk about the first one. And it is this idea of normalizing change. As I said, we live in a world where change is just constant. And there's this amazing quote that I've shared before. I think Thomas More, I believe, who says this, that change, the pace of change will never be as slow as it is today. And I absolutely love that quote because it's 100% accurate. Every year, it seems as if more and more things are changing. And when you just focus on the technology side, that change is pretty intense. But looking outside of technology, inflation, supply chain challenges, Russia, Ukraine, the post-pandemic world with the possibility of even more pandemics on the rise. There's no level of certainty with anything. And so we are living in a world that is constantly changing, and it's not catastrophic changes to most degrees, but then there are some that are pretty intense. And when you bring that together with the technology changes, it is making this insane, interesting mix of possibility, if you will. And that is really kind of shaping how organizations are having to evolve to be able to handle and withstand that constant change. So organizations thriving in this constant changing world generally are focusing on different types of things. One of the things that I'm seeing that is pretty interesting is this idea of focusing on interoperability of platform systems. Back in the day, and when I say back in the day, it's like 5 years ago, organizations would spend a whole lot of money on a massive platform system. And the reason why is that platforms give you so much functionality and capability right out of the gate. Imagine you need a CRM system, and so you go to the typical players, and they can come in and they can establish a fully end-to-end platform capability in your organization in months. It's not that hard versus having to build something custom from the ground up that generally would take years to do. The problem with those monolithic systems is that they are fantastic if you fit within that use case. But every organization is basically a snowflake. Yes, I think there are about 80% of the functionality of organizations that are very similar, but it's that last 20% that differentiates every organization. And it's because we're made up of very different people. There is no such thing as a cookie cutter type of a organization. Even if you make shoes, this shoe company is going to make shoes differently than this shoe company. And that is what is why we have such a fascinating economic system. But because of that, organizations were investing a tremendous amount of money on these monolithic platforms, and we're finding that in order to truly differentiate, you have to really focus on that experience, and that experience means that you need to customize that last 20% to focus on your customer specifically. So interoperability is the way that organizations are doing that. Now, they may have that foundational piece that is kind of connecting the dots and pulling the data from the different systems, and that's crucial. But it's adding those other elements that enable organizations to customize and personalize information and experiences to their customers that make a drastic difference in how effective they are. The other thing that I'm seeing, and this one's going to be more of a new thing that's happening, is how we use generative AI in the workplace. I actually was using it this morning to prepare for the conversations that I'm going to be sharing with you. It helps me kind of align, my thinking around what's possible. At the same time, help me kind of source information really quickly. Normally, I would use Google. What are the top trends that people are using for these things, or what's the market forces impact on the healthcare industry? The problem with that is it forces me to have to do a lot of digging. But when I can ask a generative AI to go out and source that for me, and then I can go in and then read and then kind of collect my thoughts, that helps me kind of get there faster. Now, the risk is that people just copy and paste. They'll write in this thing, hey, make me an article to do these things, copy, paste in, and that's their answer. The problem is generative AI isn't there yet. And so it does still require us to put in the effort, but what's really nice is it gets you further along much faster. And so how we use that in our industry is going to really be interesting to see what happens. Digital transformation sometimes is full of rote tasks. And the way that we're seeing how generative AI is being used for programming challenges, copywriting, using it to automate things in Excel. There are so many fascinating spaces that generative AI is being used in the workforce. It's not only just, making really cool images that you see or really fun, song lyrics of imaginative, songwriters, but it's actually being used in a way that is enabling productivity to happen. At the same time, it's also putting into question so many things about who owns that information, who owns that thought. If it's if that capability is sourcing it from all of these places and then giving it to you, and then you use that and then capitalize on that, what are the ethical challenges with that? So as we look at this kind of movement to generative AI, it is going to be fascinating to see what happens and how that impacts our day-to-day activities. The other thing, and kind of wrapping with this one, when I think about normalizing change, is this idea of finding ways to do more with less. With inflation, with supply chain challenges, you look at Silicon Valley and how it's impacting the workforce. Like, we are finding ways to use new capabilities, new technologies to do more with less. This is just one way that we see what's happening is kind of leveraging other capabilities to do that. What it's going to do is it's actually going to create new innovations. Again, kind of generative AI of how do you use that to make websites and reduce the labor-intensive aspects of certain aspects of jobs. Those things are coming. So what you're going to see is more improvement and efficiencies using technology to do more with less. And so that'll be interesting to see what happens. The second trend that I'm seeing is this idea of embracing new models of connection. Now, I don't think you can see this, but behind me is Oculus or Quest 2. And I absolutely love my VR headset. I'm not a gamer. When it comes to gaming, it's just never been my thing. But I love to connect with people through VR. My son lives many states away, and he goes to college. And one of my favorite things to do was to watch movies with him. But with the gap in distance, we can't do that in person. And so we have found a way to watch movies together using the VR headset. And what I love about it is I am able to watch a movie with him, and then as we're watching the movie, I can turn and have a conversation at the same time. I'm not a big fan of looking at people through screens. I've never really liked that. It feels so impersonal. There is a physical device between you and me. And it gets the job done. I use it every day when I'm at work. But if I could be in person, that would be the most ideal. However, being able to work with someone in a virtual space, it feels better than your Zoom. And actually, a good friend of mine and I were connecting, and we set up a meeting in the workspace in Meta, and it was kind of impressive to see that even though I was looking at his avatar, I was still being able to connect with him in a much more personal and authentic way than I was on my screen. And the technology is only going to get better. I can only imagine what it's going to look like a year from today, because I promise you, it's not going to be the same cartoon kind of feel. I've seen demonstrations where the headsets are actually able to then kind of model your face and able to see a version of that in virtual reality. And it's radically going to shift how we connect with one another. Because then, if you think about how we work and the remote working model that we have kind of evolved into after the pandemic, it is going to shift how we think about what does it mean to connect and work with somebody. When time zones are really the only thing that separates you, then it makes it much easier for people to connect. One of the biggest challenges of remote working is the fact that you are stuck in your office alone or your room alone, and there's no real way to connect. And I know Accenture's been playing around with virtual work environments, and it has some growth to do, but organizations that are kind of embracing that capability today are putting themselves in a much better position so that when new capabilities and new technologies evolve and are released, they're going to be much more ready to adapt and use that and take full advantage of that. Imagine your teams being able to come together, once a day for an hour in this virtual world to kick off meetings or to workshop a problem or to, sit down and try to figure out how to solve something. You know, it doesn't mean that we're going to be living in these things, which I hope not, but being able to find strategic moments to connect enables us to change the way that we connect, and it's really impressive. AR, on the other hand, is just as important in that same space. Imagine putting on a pair of glasses or some type of device that doesn't change your environment, but augments your environment and enhances it with information. That in and of itself is going to be pretty impressive. I think the movie Swan Song that's on Apple Plus is probably one of my favorite visions of what that could be. And to be honest, I can't wait for that to happen because the ability to connect with people in a augmented reality space is probably the coolest thing ever. So I'm very excited about this one. But as organizations are thinking about transformation, geography is becoming less and less important, but connection is becoming more and more important. How can we bring those two things together? And to me, this is the capability that's opening the door for just that. So look for more in this space. The third thing that I am seeing that's going to be interesting, specifically this year, is how organizations find new opportunities in the chaos. There is so much happening. Like I said earlier, you have inflation, you have Russia, Ukraine, you have the pandemic that is, spawning other types of things, supply chain. Within the United States, immigration, other political challenges, and all of these things. Organizations that see this chaos and begin to get really scared and start to make very conservative choices, they'll be the ones that struggle. But the organizations that see these changes and try to orient around their customers' need, they are going to just take off. You see for example, right now in Silicon Valley, there are the companies that you've seen just blow up and blossom are beginning to lay off tens of thousands of people. Google, Tesla, Microsoft, Amazon, all of these organizations that are at the top of every Fortune 100 list are laying off thousands of people. But what is that doing? It's creating a new job market for many organizations that would have struggled to hire those same people 2 years ago. And now you think about the great minds that are going from a Google, that are going from an Amazon into these really great companies. It's going to shift. And organizations that see this as an opportunity, that see how to leverage those capabilities, are going to reap the reward and the benefit of taking advantage of all of this that's happening and propelling their organization forward. This isn't a situation of taking advantage. This is a situation of, let me reframe that. This isn't a situation of taking advantage of someone else's, problems, but knowing and taking advantage of the landscape that exists will enable you to, make different choices. And therefore, those choices will have much more positive impacts on your organization. So, I think about this one, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I suspect there will be some companies that you never heard of kind of break through, because when you have such a changing landscape, you can't help but see something that no one else is seeing. And then all of a sudden, boom, you've got the next Uber, you've got the next Tesla, you've got the next, OpenAI. And it'll be fascinating to see what happens with all of that talent out there, with all of the opportunity that exists. Finding new opportunities in this chaos is going to, it's going to change a lot of things. And so I'm really excited to see what happens. So the fourth trend that I want to talk about is this idea of differentiating through customer and employee experiences tied to business metrics. This is one of those spaces that in my industry, I hear so many challenges to tying experience to metrics. Podcasts, articles, people really struggle. It's like, well, if you do this, you'll improve your NPS score. But what does that have to do with your revenue? What does that have to do with your cost? And there is a direct correlation to experience to dollars. And the NPS score has a different type of impact, but it's well before you ever get to this moment. And so let me kind of walk you through that. One of my clients back in the day, they had a model where you needed to schedule an appointment. And then when you went into your consultation, you were then given the ability to buy their plan. When we started looking at their value chain, we found that by improving sales at the schedule an appointment stage by, let's say, 5%, would generate about $30 million. But if you were able to increase the acceptance of that treatment plan, you would get a factor of like 6. So thinking like $100+ million, same 5%. And by knowing those numbers, we understood where we needed to focus. And it didn't mean that we didn't look at this, bookings, but we wanted to primarily focus on plan acceptance. And so we changed the way that people were presented the plan. We changed the interaction between the consultant and their customer, and we shifted the way that this process worked to empower the customer in such a way that when they walked into the room to better understand the plan, they weren't afraid and they didn't feel like they were being forced or rushed into a decision. And we ended up seeing a tremendous impact to the business by understanding and fixing these moments that mattered. To me, every organization has the same type of capability. Every organization has a customer journey that you can track against your value chain. And with the forces in the world right now, there is a much greater emphasis on business impact. And so organizations are no longer going to take a laissez-faire approach to experience. They're going to want to see direct experience to business impact, well beyond your typical KPIs that you're used to seeing. And organizations that can tie that value chain to the experience are going to see a major shift in how they provide to their customers and to their employees. And so this one's actually going to be really interesting, especially for me, because this is the world that I live in, and I get really excited about how to quantify this information. And so this one's going to be great. So really excited about this. So the fifth trend that I'm seeing that I believe is going to shift how we transform is this idea of differentiation through sustainability. Sustainability used to be this thing that I thought was more of an ideology. And now it is becoming much more mainstream. It is the expected view that you are being responsible with the way that you approach sustainability, that the way you produce waste and the way you manage your material and your cost, that you're doing it in a sustainable manner. And it starts with people changing their own personal lives and then having the expectation that the organizations they interact with, whether it's the people you buy from or the companies you work with or for, you now have that expectation put onto them. And that kind of goes back to this concept of liquid expectation, where wherever you have a positive experience, you now take that experience and you start to apply it to other spaces. And that's exactly what's happening here, is that my expectation for how I live, I now expect the companies that I invest in, the companies that I buy from, to share those same types of beliefs. And now I also expect where I work to share that same belief. And so sustainability is this way of thinking about how we do things that is now permeating every aspect of our life. Organizations that are going to do well in this next year and beyond are going to be organizations that put sustainability at the center of how they evolve. So while you focus on your customer and while you focus on your workforce, doing it in a way that is sustainable is going to be paramount. The way that we think about how we do more with less, the way we think about even like remote working, how do we enable that capability to be very productive and very effective is going to be important. Kind of going back to the previous trend where I was talking about how we connect through AR and VR. These are things that are not meant to create divisions between people, but finding ways to connect. And as we support more sustainable practices, we're going to radically shift the impact of that we have on our world, and people care about that. And I know in my own life how I've shifted the way that I buy and the organizations that I support, and it's because I've got children, and I want my children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren and generations to come to be able to enjoy this amazing planet that we live on. And that is becoming more and more important, and it's seeping into the way that we work. Therefore, when we start to think about digital transformations, how we look at that through that sustainability lens is going to be important. So I definitely urge you to look into this when you start planning out your digital transformation, or whether or not you're you're already in it. Think about, how are you thinking about sustainability? How is sustainability impacting how you transform? I'm going to wrap it up. Normalizing change. Change is happening every day, and those organizations that are adapting to this constant change, they will set themselves apart. The ones that embrace new models of connection, finding new ways to bring people together and not force people to work a very specific way, but give people the flexibility. Those are the organizations that are going to attract the right talent that enable them to transform in the direction and be the company they want to be. Finding new opportunities in the chaos that you see in the world around you. Leveraging new technologies, blockchain, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, big data, AR, VR, like all of these things, these are just tools. But when you bring them and you connect them together with what's happening in the world, you're going to be able to find new opportunities. And organizations that are going to be doing this, they're shaking things up. And it's pretty fascinating to see the differentiation through customer and employee experience tied to business metrics. As we tighten the belts, and want to make better decisions with our investments, making sure that experiences lead directly to impact is going to be vital. So how are you looking at your value chain along with your experience? Making sure you connect those dots. And then finally, differentiation through sustainability. How are you thinking about being sustainable and evolving your organization through sustainability as you orient around your customers and your workforce? That's going to be it for me today. It's been a pleasure. I've absolutely loved talking about digital transformation. I'm going to kind of shift things over to kind of talk about more human-centered design thinking. But if there are topics that you're interested in, let me know. Drop a comment below. Give this video a like if you liked it, and if you got something out of it, I hope you have. And at the end of the day, everyone needs a co-pilot. My name is Pablo Alejo, and I'm going to be yours.